everyone. I want to start this segment by playing a clip.
Honestly, Sam, if I could just get the sentence out, it, we can talk about Jimmy Dore can go and kill 15 kids tomorrow, and I still believe in force the vote.
So, for those of you that don't know, there was a cult among left media figures in left media spaces that started to gain prominence and popularity on social media, such as Twitter, YouTube, and so forth. And they all rallied around a drunk loser who came up with this dumb idea called Force the Vote. And so here's an article from Business Insider about Force the Vote, now that it's kind of in the rearview mirror. And I just wanted to read this because I haven't read the full thing yet, and I think it would be really funny. So this article is entitled, "Pointless Infighting Among Progressives is Becoming Exhausting and Harmful," from Manny Fidel. When a wing of progressives called on Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez to force a Medicare for All vote in the House, it drew a line in the sand for people on the left. Hashtag Force the Vote was an effort that intended to ostracize Republicans and centrist Democrats who don't support an overhaul of our nation's healthcare system. AOC didn't think it was a good idea, noting that forcing a vote that didn't have a chance in the House, let alone the Senate, could only cause friction among Democrats and harm their cause. Now, I want to say that as far as Force the Vote is concerned, they've already won, because this article is written, and this article is written in a fashion that claims that those people are on the left. Nico House is not a leftist. Jimmy Dore is not a leftist. I think people like Brianna Joy Gray are leftists, or maybe social democrats, right? But let's be honest, most of the people that pushed Force the Vote as hard as they could were not left-wingers. They were right-wingers that were performing in psychological operations to split the online left, right? And the idea that right articles are going to be written about them, calling them left-wingers, I think that is doing extreme amounts of damage. So let me go on. This disagreement created a loud faction of progressives who are now anti-AOC. They are seemingly led by comedian turned political talk show host Jimmy Dore, who in December said that AOC is now, quote, standing between you and healthcare, and went on to call her a liar, a gaslighter, and a coward. Let me play a little bit of an example of this.
They're not accountable to anyone. I get 10 to 12 million views a month, and they won't come out and address my progressive audience. They won't come out and address...
What are you talking about with that, Jimmy?
I'm talking about anybody who's a progressive in Congress who isn't endorsing hashtag the vote. All those motherfuckers who didn't show up today at our town hall. Every fucking one of them is selling you out and canceling you for their own personal gain.
So yeah, this guy, that's just one clip. This guy had multiple streams where he would get drunk and scream at people if they didn't agree with him and march with him in lockstep. This guy is not a leftist. Jimmy Dore as well, and I covered a lot of this. In fact, I have a whole playlist about this shit. Jimmy Dore also did a lot of very nice softball interviews with far right-wing militias, right? He also had socialists on his show and harassed and attacked socialists on his show. The guy is not a left-winger, right? And that's the thing. It's like, if you look at the situation, right, on its face, you'll say, oh, why are all these progressives attacking AOC? And that's the problem, is these people style themselves as progressives, but they are not progressives. And then when you see articles like this, people will read this and go like, oh, the progressives are infighting. No, 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 no. The progressives are not infighting. There is an insurgent amount of people on social media sites rallying around people like Jimmy Dore, Nico House, etc. They are not leftists, right? Again, similarly, and I know this is incendiary rhetoric and a lot of people get triggered when I say this, but similarly to how the Nazi Party called themselves the National Socialists to get some people on board. It's like, oh yeah, socialism, that's cool. We're National Socialists. And then some people don't really read the details. They don't read the fine print and then just support them. That's kind of what this is. Now, again, that's a little incendiary of an example, but fuck you, stay mad. Unthinkably, given her standing as the highest profile progressive member of Congress, AOC saw her Twitter mentions flooded with hate-fueled banter and accusations of being a sellout and a fraud. She'll be fine, of course. as that's just part of her job. But the impulse from progressives to turn on their own, and for relatively dumb reasons, has become a baffling spectacle and a maddening trend that stalled real change. Instead of infighting and bickering, progressives need to take a step back and understand what the best path to progress is. Right? But again, I don't think these people were progressives. Yes, there were a lot of people that are right-wing that supported Bernie Sanders. Why? Well, a lot of the examples that these people will point out is, even in a lot of very, 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 very conservative parties in Europe, for example, they still agree with Medicare for all, because it's just the basic human right thing to do, right? And so, again, their example is far-right parties in Europe agree with healthcare for everyone. The coalition of people that want universal health care, right? Again, look at the polls. 70 to 80% of Americans want universal health care. You think 78 to 80% of Americans are progressive or leftist? No. There are contingents of right-wing people in that group, and that's what we need to understand. You stab my back and I'll stab yours. The 2020 Democratic primaries were heated. People who were passionate about a particular candidate would sometimes wade into insults and ridicule on social media. Just about every candidate had a small but loud faction of supporters who would do this. But for whatever reason, Bernie Sanders' online faction got the most media attention. While Sanders continued to offer an inclusive agenda and even denounced the more annoying parts of his base, scores of liberals and progressives became turned off by even the thought of Sanders. They held this grudge despite his long-standing record on vital issues and humble demeanor. And this is the problem. Look at this. You see what this article is doing? You see what it's doing? It's tying together the Bernie bro myth with the force the vote people. I'm telling you this right now. Now, the neoliberals were to have smeared Bernie with anything and everything. But the fact that Bernie appealed to some right-wing base, right, especially in 2016, the anti-Hillary people, you have to understand, right, that makes him ripe for attacks, right? The idea that his policies appeal to anyone on the right, it's going to be weaponized and it's going to be used by right-wingers. Now, am I saying that everyone on the internet has to be, like, tone policing themselves to not offend people that are going to attack them regardless? No, not at all. What I'm saying is we have to be sure what's in these groups. When I went to Canvass and worked on the Bernie Sanders campaign, right, there were a couple people I met in that campaign, and I'm not going to name any names. They were transphobic. They didn't like trans or gay people. I thought to myself, why is that? Why would you be canvassing for Bernie Sanders if you don't like trans or gay people? Well, the answer is pretty clear. It's because Bernie's agenda speaks for all Americans, not just trans and gay Americans, right? So the idea that people would want to advocate for universal health care because their mother, for example, is maybe dying of cancer or something, you know, that doesn't impact their views that are maybe bigoted or socially conservative. So I want to, as an example, point that out. And again, that's not anything to say negative about the Bernie coalition. Again, that's to say how far right this country's parties are, and how that can be a problem in these situations. This became clear when Sanders, as the head of the Senate Budget Committee, asked Neera Tanden, Biden's pick to lead the Office of Budget Management, to reflect on her own attacks on social media, including personal attacks she hurled at Bernie himself. Tanden apologized for her actions, but if you looked under any tweet about the exchange, you saw countless accusations of sexism on Bernie's part, asking attacks on his character and a general sense of pure hatred for the man. This grudge against Bernie Sanders held by so-called progressives remains weird and a little bit sad, I agree? Especially considering how long it's been since the primaries. The disdain for the Vermont senator even affects the people he associates with. When Move On, a high-profile progressive advocacy organization, endorsed Nina Turner, a former Bernie Sanders surrogate for Congress, it was met with a wave of displeasure. The list of pointless grudges doesn't stop there. I'll be the first to admit I was upset with Senator Elizabeth Warren during the 2020 primaries. I felt she had undermined the progressive cause, not just by promoting a misleading story that implied Senator Bernie Sanders was sexist, but also by not corralling her supporters behind him when her campaign ran out of steam. Agreed. I think, again, from the get-go, from the jump, the 2020 primary was a Bernie versus Biden race. There's a reason why those debates were split into 2 nights every now and then. There's a reason why 89 people ran for president. It was all to limit and reduce the airtime that Bernie Sanders had against Joe Biden. That was the plan. They saw that Bernie versus Hillary, when it was just one-on-one, they saw Bernie rising, and maybe if they had just a little bit more time, Bernie would have been the nominee, right? And they knew that that was the case. And their inoculation plan for that in 2020 was to have everyone and their grandma run for president to muddy the waters. It was a Bernie versus Biden race from the jump. Elizabeth Warren and all the other freak shows knew that, and they narcissistically went on with it anyway because they don't care about policy. They cared about raising their personal profiles, and that's something that needs to be remembered. So I want you to understand that. I do not personally forgive Elizabeth Warren. Again, she was recently doing something really great, going after President Biden over the $50,000 cancellation of student debt. But that doesn't mean I like her. If a politician does something good, great. They did something good. That doesn't mean I have to like them. But now that a whole year has passed, it is easy to admit that Warren is a pivotal part of the progressive agenda and should be supported as such. Many progressives, though, simply can't get over that grudge. She's still a snake in too many people's eyes. Again, I agree with that. So I disagree with the article's writer here. I personally think she is a snake, right? That's my personal opinion. She's been a pivotal part of the progressive agenda. Proof? I'd love to see proof of that. Outside of this student debt cancellation plan, I don't see anything about that. These people are too petty to see that she's fighting for everything they want, including universal health care, a $15 minimum wage, and cancellation of student loan debt. It will be harder for progressives to accomplish these things if people who advocate for them aren't supportive of the lawmakers who make them happen. Again, this is where I'd start to disagree with the article, right? You can support a politician when they do good things. I do. Like I said, I made a video about Elizabeth Warren and was clapping. I was saying, hell yes. She made a statement basically calling Joe Biden a racist if he doesn't cancel $50,000 of student loan debt, right? And that's good, and that should be celebrated. But the whole point of critiquing politicians and pressuring politicians is to get them to change. Right? If Elizabeth Warren over the next year starts to redeem herself, if this is just the first part in her rehabilitation tour, I'll listen. Right? If she over the course of 2020 and 2021 wants to go out there, right, and do these amazing progressive champion causes, I'll listen. And if I feel like at enough of a point, if she does a lot more events and starts advocating more heavily for these policies, I'll say I'll put her back in the good column. But again, you can't just put someone in the good column if they're just putting their fucking finger in their mouth and seeing which way the wind blows. And that's what Elizabeth Warren is doing. I think, yes, it's good to support politicians when they do things that you like, but at the same time, you have to pressure them to continue doing so. However, pressuring them, right, is not by spamming snake emojis on Twitter, right? That was fun in the primary, and that was fun, maybe slightly after the primary, but the primary's over. Spamming snake emojis on Twitter, I'm sorry, it's fun in the chat room. I love that shit. Right, but it really doesn't accomplish anything. And that's, I think, the main point of what this article is trying to say. But these people are too petty, blah, blah, blah. It will be harder for I already read that. Okay, it's not just Warren who's been targeted by progressive grudges either. Like Sanders, Warren has fought for a slew of policies that progressives dream about. But for those who illogically consider them enemies of the progressive movement, that doesn't matter. As someone who spends a lot of time on Twitter pointing out the hypocrisies of politicians, I am not saying you shouldn't be skeptical of them in general. Even trivial forms of ridicule aren't so bad in the larger discourse, but the people should save their real disdain for an actual policy or platform they disagree with, instead of hating someone who's on their side for some trivial thing that happened more than a year ago. Debate is fine and encouraged, but the shaming and booing of one's own team is counterproductive. Now again, I think it's very suspect to call Elizabeth Warren on this team. Elizabeth Warren's, outside of the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, right? Elizabeth Warren's chief contribution to politics has been tanking the Bernie Sanders campaign. Think about that. So her first major contribution was the CFP, and look what happened to the CFP under the Trump administration, right? Look what happened, right? And her second chief contribution to political discourse in America was destroying Bernie Sanders' campaign. Yeah, sure. She makes a good statement on Twitter every now and then. But you have to look at the grand scheme of things. That was her role in that position. Her role was to destroy the Bernie campaign for hopes of a position somewhere in the Biden administration. And now, look what Biden's doing. Biden's just ignoring her. Has Biden responded to her calls for a 50,000 student loan debt cancellation? Yeah, he has. To say, fuck you, bitch. 10,000 at best. Good job, Warren. Good job. And again, does that mean she's canceled? No. Canceling a politician doesn't do anything, right? You have to judge their actions at each given time. And her largest contribution to American politics was destroying any hope we had of getting that student debt cancellation. So that's my point there as a point of disagreement. Figuring out who the best options for progress are shouldn't be nearly this complicated. Think of the things you support and support the politicians who agree with you. Naturally, when different strategies toward progress are debated, things may get heated. You might grow weary of someone who has less tolerance for them. That's totally fine and normal even, but progressives holding these year-long grudges against other progressives can only hurt the ultimate goal. Now again, Force the Vote succeeded. What was their goal? I covered this. Some dumb bitch on the Gray Zone was talking, I think Max Blumenthal, was talking about how the goal of Force the Vote was to drive a wedge between regular people that are poor and suffering and any hope of alleviating that suffering. This is a right-wing psychological operation, and the idea that someone who's writing this article doesn't know that, to me, is sad. You have to understand, again, Bernie almost won in 2016. If it weren't for bizarre things like New York having a 6-month pre-registration deadline or whatever, he might have won. Right? We'll never know. If it weren't for Donna Brazile leaking questions to Hillary Clinton at town halls, etc., and shutting down polling places and voting booths, he might have won. We'll never know that. Right? But ever since that moment, the right, the neoliberals, they've been plotting of how to prevent a second attempt at Bernie Sanders. And then that's why you see people like Nico House, who was supporting Tulsi Gabbard in the 2020 primary. His role was not to support progressive policies. His role was to destroy the Bernie campaign. Right? And that's why you see Breonna Joy Gray, again, in this bizarre clip.
Honestly, Sam, if I could just get the sentence out. We can talk about Jimmy Dore can go and kill 15 kids tomorrow, and I still believe in Force the Vote.
So you see the former press secretary of Bernie 2020 teaming up with Nico House, who didn't even agree with Bernie's campaign, right? This alliance is an alliance that's designed to destroy the left wing, right? And there's a lot of people that are falling for it, and I feel bad for them. But the idea that they are even calling themselves left wing, that's the problem. Articles like this where someone can think, oh yeah, Nico House is a progressive, right? And Nico House fans are progressives and they just disagree and they're being petty. No. They're being brainwashed to become further to the right. I wish Bernie Sanders was the Democratic nominee in 2020, and I wish Elizabeth Warren, after realizing her campaign was toast, had done more to solidify his chances. But both of these officials, along with the newly chastised from the left AOC, again, AOC is not chastised from the left, have a moral fortitude that's actually pretty rare in politics. They serve us, but we have a role to play in their success. We just have to be smart about it. So I agree with most of this article, but again, and this is something that a lot of people have been getting wrong. Nico House, Jimmy Dore, all these people are trying to define themselves as far left. They're far left. Like anyone who disagrees with them is a neoliberal or a rad lib or a sellout or a health insurance executive, right? That's what I've been called. I'm an anarchist, and they call me a radical liberal. Wait, remember the last time radical liberal was in the news? Right. It was when Kelly Loeffler, a Republican, was using it against a run-of-the-mill, maybe slightly to the left, Democrat Raphael Warnock in Georgia. These people use Republican language. They act like Republicans. And their net gain, their actual contribution to politics, are something that Republicans would like. And you have to understand that. They are not the far left. This is not the far left, right? I am the far left. The far left is smart enough to know that these people are dumb as shit, okay? And this misconstrued idea that, oh, somehow these people are to the left of me, and therefore that makes them crazy, only feeds into this horseshoe theory bullshit, right? Like, and I have had conversations, right, with, you know, people that are relatively popular in left-wing media spaces that have parroted this idea, and no offense to them, that Nico House and Jimmy Dore are the far left. They are not the far left. That idea needs to be destroyed. That idea needs to be looked at, examined, and laughed at. They are right-wingers in sheep's clothing, nothing else, right? The far left is not attacking AOC, right? It's the far right disguised as the far left, and that's something you need to be able to see through. The idea, right, what they're doing is they're trying to inoculate people against left-wing ideas, right? They want people, right, to say, oh, that person's far left, and ignore them, because they don't want the far left to take off. They don't want anarchists and communists and socialists to gain more power. They want their power to be destroyed. And that's what they're doing. They're making the brand look bad. They're destroying the brand of socialism, communism, anarchism, right? Without even understanding the brand at all. And they're getting hundreds, or if not thousands, of angry poor people to be manipulated for their smear campaigns. Look at the People's Party. Do I think everyone on Twitter who is a People's Party Jimmy Dore fan is secretly a right-winger? No, I don't. I think a lot of them are poor and suffering and are being manipulated and abused online. I think Nico House and Jimmy Dore and Nick Brana are absolutely right-wing plants. I think they are absolutely doing this for personal profit and to destroy the left. And that's what they've done. And then you see articles like this in Business Insider, of all places, that is claiming that these people are to the left of AOC. They are not to the left of AOC. Not in any way, shape, or form. So, anyway, that's me getting off my soapbox. How was that? Damn, that was like a fucking